James Caldwell's hand trembled on his rifle. 3 strangers on his porch. The woman's lips were blue. The boy wasn't breathing right. His daughter Emma had died on a porch like this 7 years ago, begging him to save her while fever burned her alive. He'd failed then. The woman's eyes opened feral and pleading. "Please," she croaked. "My babies." Jim's throat closed. He should walk away. Every instinct screamed at him to lock the door to protect the grave he'd been digging for himself for 7 years. Instead, he knelt down. Before we continue, please subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss these powerful stories. Comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. James Caldwell hadn't prayed in 7 years. Not since the fever took Margaret. Not since tiny Emma stopped breathing in his arms, her last word, a whispered "Papa," that still woke him screaming some nights. He'd built this ranch into a fortress after that 40 miles from the nearest town where grief was the only companion he deserved. Dawn broke bitter cold that November morning in 1878. Jim stepped onto his porch with coffee he wouldn't taste, same as every morning, and his boots stopped moving. 3 bodies huddled against his door. The rifle was in his hands before thought caught up. Drifters. Bandits, maybe. This far into Wyoming territory, you didn't take chances. His finger touched the trigger. Then he saw her face. Pale as death. Lips cracked and bleeding. Eyes closed but moving beneath the lids, dreaming or dying, he couldn't tell. A woman, maybe 30, maybe younger. Hard-living aged folks out here. Her arms were wrapped around 2 children like she could shield them from the world with nothing but will. The boy was maybe 8 or 9, face gaunt, breathing shallow. The little girl couldn't have been more than 5, her small fist clutching her mother's threadbare coat. Jim's hands started shaking. Emma had been 5. No. He said it out loud to the ghosts, to God, to whoever was listening. Not again. He should go inside, close the door. This wasn't his problem. People died out here all the time. He'd barely survived his own dying, had no business trying to save anyone else. The woman's eyes opened. They locked onto his. Not begging. Not yet. Just assessing. Calculating if he was the type to shoot or the type to help. Her hand moved slow to the knife at her belt. Don't. Jim lowered the rifle. Ain't gonna hurt you. Then why the gun? Her voice came out like gravel, barely above a whisper. Why the knife? They stared at each other. The wind picked up, carrying ice that felt like needles. The little girl whimpered in her sleep. The sound punched through Jim's chest like a bullet. The woman saw it in his face. She sat up straighter, protective instinct overriding exhaustion. We'll be gone by sunrise. Just needed somewhere the wind couldn't reach us. Sunrise was an hour ago. She blinked, looked at the sky. Something crumbled in her expression. Then we'll go now. Where? Anywhere that's not here. We're not beggars, mister. We just needed... When's the last time those kids ate? Her jaw tightened. That's none of your concern. When's the last time you ate? She didn't answer. Her hands were shaking now, too, and not just from cold. Jim could see the bones of her wrists, the hollows in her cheeks. This woman had been starving herself to feed her children, and all 3 of them were losing the fight. The boy stirred. Mama. His voice was weak, confused. Shh, Tommy. We're going now. She tried to stand. Her legs gave out. She caught herself on the porch railing, pride and fury burning in her eyes, as she forced her body to cooperate. The boy. Tommy scrambled up, grabbing his mother's arm. Mama, you're shaking. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Jim could see the fever flush on her cheeks now, the way she couldn't quite focus her eyes. This woman wasn't just hungry. She was sick. He looked at Tommy. The boy was staring at him with those 2 old eyes, the kind kids got when they'd seen things they shouldn't have to see. protective, terrified, ready to fight a grown man with nothing but his bare hands if it meant keeping his mother and sister safe. Just like Jim used to look at his own father before the mine collapse took him. "There's food inside." Jim heard himself say it before he'd decided to say it. "Hot coffee. Fire's going." The woman went still. "Why? Why what? Why would you help us?" Because Emma's ghost was standing right there translucent in the morning light, her small hand reaching for the little girl still sleeping. Because Margaret's voice was in his head, saying what she always said. "Do the right thing, James, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Because he was so goddamn tired of being alone with his ghosts. "Because it's cold," he said instead, "and I've got food going to waste." "We don't accept charity." "Good, it ain't charity. You can work for it." Her eyes narrowed. "Work how?" "Got a room needs building. Barn needs mucking. Garden needs winterizing. If you can swing a hammer or shovel shit, we'll call it even." She studied him for a long moment, looking for the lie, the trap, the ulterior motive. Jim kept his face neutral, let her look. He'd been alone so long he'd forgotten how to lie anyway. Finally she nodded. Once, sharp. "One meal, then we discuss terms." "Fair enough." He turned toward the door, then stopped. "Name's James Caldwell. Folks call me Jim." "Sarah Mitchell." She paused. "This is Thomas. That's Rose." "Ma'am." Jim tipped his hat. Then he looked at Tommy. "Son?" The boy's eyes went wide, surprised to be acknowledged. Jim remembered that too, being invisible until adults needed something from you. He held the door open. Sarah hesitated on the threshold, her survival instincts screaming at her not to trust this, not to walk into a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere. But Rose stirred again, coughing, and that decided it. She crossed the threshold. Tommy followed his hand on that knife at his belt, ready to die, protecting his mother if this went bad. Jim closed the door behind them. The warmth of the house hit them like a wall. Rose's eyes fluttered open, confused. "Mama." "Shh, baby, we're safe. Just for a little while." The girl looked around, saw Jim, and buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Sarah's arms tightened around her. "Bathroom's through there," Jim said, pointing. "Wash basin has clean water. I'll get breakfast started." He moved to the stove, giving them space, trying not to think about the last time he'd cooked breakfast for anyone but himself. His hands found the familiar rhythm anyway. Bacon, eggs, biscuits already made from yesterday, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Behind him, he heard quiet voices. Sarah whispering to her children. Tommy asking if it was okay. Rose saying she was hungry. The ordinary sounds of a family in his house for the first time in 7 years. Jim's hand slipped. The knife clattered against the counter. He gripped the edge, breathing hard, fighting the urge to tell them to leave to preserve the careful emptiness he'd built his life around. "Sir," Tommy's voice. Careful, tentative. "Can I help?" Jim turned. The boy stood there, small and thin and determined, like helping was the only way he knew to pay debts. "You know how to set a table?" Tommy's face lit up. "Yes, sir." "Plates are in that cabinet. Forks and knives in the drawer." The boy moved like he'd been given a mission. Sarah watched from the chair by the fire. Rose in her lap, something unreadable in her expression. Pride, maybe, or grief, or both. Jim focused on the food. The bacon sizzled, the biscuits warmed, the coffee perked. Tommy set 4 plates on the table, 4 like it was normal, like this wasn't the first time in 7 years Jim had needed more than one, and stood back waiting for approval. Good work. The boy's smile could have melted snow. When the food was ready, Jim carried the plates over. Sarah started to stand to serve her children first, but Jim shook his head. "Sit. You look like you're gonna fall over." "I'm fine." "You said that already. Didn't make it true then either." He set a plate in front of Rose. The little girl stared at it like she'd never seen food before. Her hand reached out trembling, then pulled back. "It's okay, baby," Sarah whispered. "You can eat." Rose looked at her mother, then at Jim, then back at the plate. She picked up a piece of bacon with both hands and took the smallest, most careful bite. Her eyes closed. A tiny sound escaped her throat. Jim's chest hurt. He set plates in front of Tommy and Sarah. The boy grabbed his fork like he was afraid someone would take the food away. Sarah just stared at hers, her eyes shining. "Something wrong with it?" Jim asked. "No, it's..." Her voice cracked. "Thank you." "Eat." They ate. Rose devoured everything, barely pausing to breathe. Tommy ate fast, but methodical, years of hunger teaching him to make every bite count. Sarah ate slowly, watching her children, watching Jim still waiting for the catch. Jim ate nothing, just drank his coffee and tried not to remember breakfast with Margaret and Emma. Tried not to hear his daughter's laugh. Tried not to feel the ghost of his wife's hand on his shoulder. When the plates were empty, Sarah stood. "Where do you want us to start?" "Start what?" "The work. You said we could work for the meal." "Sit down. We had an agreement." "Sarah." Jim said her name for the first time. She froze. "You're burning up with fever. Your daughter can barely stand. Your son looks like he hasn't slept in days. Nobody's working today." "We don't accept..." "I know, not charity." Jim refilled his coffee. "Call it an advance on future work. Once you're all rested and fed proper, we'll talk about that room I need built." Her hands gripped the back of the chair. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Being kind. Nobody's kind. Not without wanting something." Jim looked at her. Really looked. Saw the bruises on her wrists, old ones faded yellow-green. Saw the way she flinched when he moved too fast. Saw the walls in her eyes built from betrayals he could only guess at. "Maybe I'm just used to eating alone," he said quietly. "And I'm tired of it." Sarah stared at him. Something shifted in her face. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something. "The barn has a loft," Jim continued. "Warmer than the porch. Cleaner than what you've been sleeping in. There's blankets. Privacy. Door you can bar from the inside if it makes you feel safer." How long what? How long can we stay?" Jim looked at Rose dozing against her mother, at Tommy fighting to keep his eyes open, child's pride keeping him from admitting exhaustion, at Sarah waiting for him to name his price to demand his payment in flesh or servitude or degradation. "If those kids snore," he said, "I'll build them a room." Sarah's breath caught. "What?" "Heard what I said. You're offering us a room, a permanent room. Barn loft's fine for now, but winter's coming hard. Kids that small shouldn't sleep in a barn when there's a house right here." "You don't even know us." "No, but I know what it's like to lose everything." Jim stood, started clearing plates. "And I know what I should have done the last time someone needed help." "What happened?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. The words stuck in his throat like broken glass. Sarah saw it, read it in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the plates too tight. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't be. Just rest." He moved to the door, grabbed his coat. "I've got work to do. Barn loft's straight back. Clean straw on the left side. Help yourself to anything you need." He was halfway out the door when her voice stopped him. "James." He turned. She was standing now, Rose in her arms. Tommy pressed against her side, a family of 3, held together by nothing but will and love and stubbornness. "Thank you," Sarah said, "for seeing us, for..." Her voice broke. "For treating us like people." Jim's throat closed up. He nodded. Once pulled his hat low and walked out before she could see the wetness in his eyes. Outside, the cold air hit him like salvation. He leaned against the porch railing, breathing hard, his whole body shaking. What the hell had he just done? He'd invited strangers into his home. given them food, shelter, hope, offered to build them a room for God's sake like they were going to stay, like this was going to be something more than temporary, like he was going to let himself care again. No. He said it to the wind, to the mountains, to the ghosts that wouldn't leave him alone. No, this is temporary. They'll rest, get strong, and move on. That's how this works. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. Because when Rose had smiled at him over that bacon, when Tommy had called him sir, with something like hope in his voice, when Sarah had whispered thank you, like he'd given her the world instead of just breakfast, something frozen in his chest had cracked, and he didn't know if that was salvation or destruction. Jim walked to the barn, his footsteps heavy in the snow. Work. That's what he needed. Work to stop thinking. Work to stop feeling. Work to stop remembering. He grabbed an axe, started splitting wood. The rhythm was familiar, mindless, brutal. Swing, split, stack, swing, split, stack. His breath came hard and fast, fogging in the cold air. His muscles burned. Good. Pain he could handle. Pain made sense. But every time he swung the axe, he saw Emma's face. Every time the wood split, he heard Margaret's voice. "Do the right thing, James." "I am," he gasped. "I'm doing it. I'm helping them. Are you? Or are you already planning how to protect yourself when they leave? They will leave. Everyone leaves. Or everyone dies." The axe missed. Glanced off the log, nearly took his foot off. Jim stumbled back, breathing like he'd run a mile. "Stop," he whispered. "Please just stop." But the ghosts never stopped. They'd been with him every day for 7 years, reminding him what he'd lost, what he'd failed to save, what he didn't deserve to have again. He looked back at the house. Smoke curled from the chimney. Warm. Alive. Full of people who needed him. People he was already terrified to lose. Jim set down the axe, walked to the woodpile, stared at his hands, calloused and scarred and shaking. "One day," he said to the ghosts. "Give me 1 day to figure out what the hell I'm doing." The wind answered with silence. Inside the barn loft, Sarah laid Rose down on the clean straw, covered her with a blanket that smelled like horses and hay and safety. Tommy curled up beside his sister, his small body finally relaxing, the knife still clutched in one hand. Sarah sat between them and her children, watching the door, waiting for the trap to spring. It had been 6 months since Daniel died. 6 months of running, hiding, surviving. The debt collectors had taken the house 3 days after the funeral. Taken everything. Furniture, clothes, the few pieces of jewelry her mother had left her. They'd have taken the children too, if they could have found a legal way. So Sarah ran. Took her babies and disappeared into the wilderness, working when she could, stealing when she had to, sleeping in abandoned buildings and under bridges, and once in a cave with a family of raccoons who'd been more welcoming than most humans. 3 days ago, they'd arrived in this territory. A clerk at the general store had mentioned a rancher up in the mountains. "Keeps to himself," the man had said. "Lost his family some years back. Ornery as hell but decent. Might have work." Sarah had nothing else to try, so she'd walked. 3 days through snow and cold and exhaustion, her children growing weaker with every mile, until she'd seen this ranch house and decided to risk one night on the porch. She'd expected to be shot, or worse. She hadn't expected kindness, and that scared her more than cruelty ever could. Because cruelty she understood. Cruelty had rules. You kept your head down, did what you were told, protected your children as best you could, and survived. But kindness was dangerous. Kindness made you hope. And hope was the cruelest thing of all when it was taken away. Sarah pulled the blanket tighter around her children. Rose was already asleep, her little face peaceful for the first time in months. Tommy was fighting it, his eyes drooping, his grip on the knife loosening. "Mama," he whispered. "Shh, baby. Sleep." "Is he gonna hurt us?" "No." "How do you know?" Sarah looked at the barn door, at the house beyond it, at the smoke rising from the chimney. "Because," she said softly, "hurt people. Recognize hurt people. And that man in there, he's been hurting for a long time." Tommy considered this. "So he's like us. Maybe. Can we stay?" Sarah's heart broke a little. "We'll see." "But he said—" "I know what he said, but people say a lot of things they don't mean. Papa used to do that." Sarah closed her eyes. Daniel. Her husband, her nightmare, her relief when he died, even though that made her a terrible person. He'd said beautiful things when he was sober, promised her the world, then drank it all away and blamed her when the world didn't appear. "Mr. Caldwell's not like your father," she said, hoping it was true. "How do you know?" "Because he offered without asking for anything back." Tommy thought about this. Then, "Mama, are we gonna be okay?" Sarah looked at her son. 9 years old and already carrying the weight of a man's responsibilities. Protecting his mother, caring for his sister, knowing when to fight and when to run. "Yeah, baby," she lied. "We're gonna be okay." Tommy's eyes finally closed. Within minutes, he was asleep, his small body relaxing, the knife finally falling from his hand. Sarah picked it up. The blade was dull, barely sharp enough to cut bread, let alone defend against a grown man. But Tommy carried it everywhere, his only weapon against a world that had tried to destroy them. She set it within reach, just in case. Then she lay down between her children, her hand on Rose's chest to feel her breathing, her other hand reaching for Tommy's, and closed her eyes. For the first time in 6 months, Sarah Mitchell slept without fear. Outside, Jim split wood until his hands bled. Inside, ghosts watched and waited. And in the space between them, something new began to grow. Something fragile. Something dangerous. Something that looked a lot like hope. 3 days passed like a fever dream Jim couldn't wake from. Sarah and the children stayed in the barn loft. Jim brought meals 3 times a day, knocked twice, left the plates by the door, and walked away before anyone could thank him. He told himself it was about giving them space. Really, it was because he couldn't handle the way Rose smiled at him, or how Tommy stood straighter when he approached, or the softness that crept into Sarah's eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. On the 4th morning, Jim found Sarah at his kitchen table. He froze in the doorway, coffee pot in hand. She'd let herself into the house, made herself at home, crossed a boundary he hadn't given her permission to cross. "Door was unlocked," she said, not apologizing. "It's always unlocked." "That's foolish. So's breaking into a man's house." "I didn't break in. I walked in." She stood, moved to the stove. "You've been bringing us food for 3 days. Time I returned the favor." "You don't owe me." "I know. Not charity. You said." She cracked eggs into a pan with the efficiency of someone who'd cooked 1,000 breakfasts. "But my children are eating you out of house and home, and I'm not the type to sit idle while a man works himself to death feeding us." Jim set down the coffee pot harder than he meant. "I'm not working myself to death." "No? Then why are your hands bleeding?" He looked down. His palms were wrapped in strips of cloth, blood seeping through. He'd split wood for 2 days straight, trying to outrun thoughts, memories, the growing ache in his chest every time he heard the children laughing in the barn. Wood needed splitting. For 2 days. Winter's coming. Winter's been coming your whole life, James. You're running from something. She flipped the eggs. Question is what? That's none of your business, I know. She slid eggs onto 2 plates, added bacon she must have found in the cold storage. But I'm making it my business, because whatever you're running from, it's gonna catch you. And when it does, I need to know if you're gonna take us down with you. Jim's jaw clenched. I would never hurt us, I know. I believe that. She set a plate in front of him. But hurt comes in more ways than fists. You pull away much further, and those kids are going to think they did something wrong. Is that what you want? I want—" His voice broke. He couldn't finish. Sarah sat down across from him, waited. "I want them to be okay," Jim finally said. "Fed, warm, safe. And then I want you to move on before I—" "Before you what?" "Before I get used to this." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah's expression softened. "Too late." "What?" "You're already used to it. Setting 4 plates instead of 1. Listening for their voices. Splitting enough wood to heat a house full of people instead of just yourself." She leaned forward. "You're already attached, James. The question is whether you're brave enough to admit it." "That's not bravery. That's stupidity." "Maybe they're the same thing." Jim stared at his plate. The eggs were perfect. The bacon crisp. The coffee strong. Everything Margaret used to make exactly the way she made it, and the ghost of her was so thick in the room he could barely breathe. "I can't do this again," he whispered. "Do what?" "Care, and then lose." Sarah reached across the table. Her hand covered his. Her palm was rough, calloused, real. "What if you don't lose?" "Everyone loses eventually." "So you'd rather lose now on your terms than take a chance on something real?" "Yes." The word tasted like ash. Sarah pulled her hand back, stood, started cleaning the kitchen with the same efficiency she'd cooked with. "You're a coward." Jim's head snapped up. "Excuse me." "You heard me. You're hiding behind grief like it's armor, using your dead wife and daughter as an excuse not to live." She turned, met his eyes. "And I get it. Believe me, I get it. But you don't get to make that choice for my children." "I'm not—" "You offered us a room. You said if they snored, you'd build it. Well, they snore. Every night. Like little chainsaws. So either you meant it or you didn't." Jim stood. His chair scraped against the floor. "You think I don't mean it?" "I think you're terrified to mean it." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Sarah moved closer. She was small, barely came up to his shoulder, but she moved like she could take up the whole room. "My husband beat me for 2 years, told me I was worthless, that I deserved it, that no one would ever want me or my children. And when he died, you know what I felt." Jim didn't answer. Relief. Pure, terrible relief. And then guilt for feeling relieved. And then anger that I wasted 2 years of my life being grateful for the days he didn't hit me instead of demanding better. Her voice shook. "So don't tell me I don't understand fear. I lived with it every single day. But I'm done running from it. The question is, are you?" Jim's hands curled into fists. "I'm not running." "Then prove it. Build the room." They stood there, 3 feet apart, breathing hard, the ghosts of their dead standing between them like witnesses. Finally, Jim nodded. Once. Sharp. "Get me the measuring tape." Sarah's face lit up. "Where is it?" "Workshop. Left wall. Can't miss it." She was out the door before he could change his mind. Jim stood alone in his kitchen, his dead wife's ghost sitting in the chair by the fire, watching him with those sad, knowing eyes. "I know," he said to her. "I know this is insane." Margaret didn't answer. She never did. But he could feel her approval anyway, warm as sunlight, painful as a knife. The door burst open. Rose ran in first, her small face bright with excitement. "Mama says you're building us a room." Jim's heart stopped. Can it have a window? I love windows. And can Tommy and me share it, or do we get our own rooms?" "Mama said we have to share, but maybe—" Rose. Sarah appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Let the man breathe. But Rose was already at his side, her small hand grabbing his. "Will you really build it? Promise?" Jim looked down at her. 5 years old, Emma's age when she died. Same dark hair, same bright eyes, same absolute faith that adults could fix anything if they just tried hard enough. Yeah, little one, he heard himself say. I promise. Rose threw her arms around his waist. The hug hit him like buckshot. He stood there frozen, his hands hovering over her small shoulders, not sure what to do, how to respond, whether he was allowed to hug back. Sarah's eyes were shining. She nodded. Permission granted. Jim's hands came down, rested on Rose's head, patted her hair awkwardly. The little girl squeezed tighter. Thank you, she whispered into his shirt. Jim's throat closed up. He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Tommy appeared in the doorway, watching carefully, his hand on that damned knife, ready to protect his sister if this went wrong. Tommy, Jim managed. Come here. The boy hesitated. Why? Because I need someone to hold the measuring tape while I figure out how big this room's gonna be. Tommy's face transformed. Really? Can't build a room without measurements. You man enough for the job. Yes, sir. Tommy crossed the room, stood at attention like a soldier. Jim almost smiled. Good. Let's get to work. They spent the morning measuring. Jim showed Tommy how to hold the tape taut, how to mark measurements, how to calculate board feet. The boy soaked it up like prairie-soaked rain, asking questions, taking mental notes, his small hands careful and precise. Rose helped by carrying nails one at a time and singing songs that made no sense but somehow made the work lighter. Sarah sketched the room layout on paper, her hands quick and sure, surprising Jim with her spatial awareness. You've done this before, he said. My father was a carpenter. Before he died. How old were you? 12. She didn't elaborate, didn't need to. 12 years old and orphaned. Jim could fill in the rest. By noon, they had a plan. A room attached to the east side of the house. Big enough for 2 beds, a small stove, a window facing the mountains. Not fancy, but solid. Safe. Permanent. When do we start? Tommy asked. Jim looked at Sarah. She looked back. Something passed between them. Understanding, agreement. The acknowledgement that this was real, that they were doing this, that there was no going back. Tomorrow, Jim said. Today we gather supplies. They worked together the rest of the day. Jim showed Tommy how to select lumber, how to check for rot and warp. Rose collected nails in a bucket, counting them out loud, losing track after 20 and starting over. Sarah inventoried tools, organized the workshop with ruthless efficiency that made Jim realize just how chaotic he'd let things get. Evening came too fast. Jim made dinner stew simple and filling, and they ate at the table. 4 people, 4 plates, 4 lives intersecting in ways Jim couldn't have predicted and didn't know how to navigate. Mr. Caldwell, Tommy said quietly. Jim, just Jim. Jim. The boy tested the name. Can I ask you something? Depends on the question. Why are you helping us? Sarah's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. Rose looked up suddenly, very interested. Jim set down his own spoon, choosing words carefully. You ever been so cold you thought you'd never be warm again? Tommy nodded. That's how I felt, for 7 years. Just cold all the way through like my bones were made of ice. Jim looked at Rose, then Tommy, then Sarah. You 3, you're warm, and I forgot what that felt like. So we're helping you? Tommy asked. Maybe we're helping each other. The boy considered this. Then, that's fair. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. Jim cleared plates. Sarah washed them without being asked. The children sat by the fire, Rose already dozing. Tommy fighting sleep, his head nodding forward and snapping back up every few minutes. Take them to the loft, Jim said. Get them settled. I'll bank the fire. Sarah nodded, started to gather her children, then stopped. James. He looked up. Thank you. For today. For all of it. We haven't even started building yet. I'm not talking about the room. She left before he could respond. Jim stood alone in his kitchen, the warmth of the fire at his back, the sound of Sarah's voice drifting from the barn as she sang her children to sleep. He walked to the window, looked out at the mountains dark against the star-filled sky. Margaret used to stand here, would rest her head against his shoulder and say, "This is enough, this moment, this life, us." "I know," Jim whispered. "I know I should let them in, but I'm so scared." The wind picked up, moved through the trees like breathing, like an answer. Jim touched the window glass, cold, real, present. "Okay," he said to Margaret's ghost. "Okay, I'll try." That night he dreamed of Emma. She was 5 years old, running through a meadow laughing. Margaret chased her, young and healthy and alive. They were playing a game, something simple and joyful. Jim tried to call out to them, but no sound came. Then Emma stopped, turned, looked right at him. "Papa, why are you just watching? I don't know how to do anything else." "Yes, you do." She held out her hand. "You just forgot." Jim tried to move. His feet were rooted to the ground. "I can't." "You can." Margaret appeared beside Emma, her hand on their daughter's shoulder. "You just have to choose to." "What if I fail again? What if you don't?" Jim woke up gasping. Moonlight streamed through the window. The house was silent. He sat up, his heart pounding, Margaret's voice still echoing in his ears. "What if you don't?" He got up, pulled on pants and a shirt, walked outside barefoot, not caring about the cold. The barn was dark, except for a soft glow from the loft. Someone was awake. Jim climbed the ladder quietly, found Sarah sitting in the doorway of the loft, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. She didn't turn when he approached. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Bad dreams?" "I get those too." Jim sat beside her, not too close, leaving space. They sat in silence for a while, breathing cold air, watching stars wheel overhead. "My husband used to hit me," Sarah said suddenly. "You probably figured that out already." "The bruises." "Yeah." She pulled the blanket tighter. First time he apologized, cried, swore it would never happen again. So I believed him. Second time he blamed me. Said I made him angry. Said if I just listened better, tried harder, he wouldn't have to discipline me. Jim's hands curled into fists. Third time I stopped counting. Because what was the point? He was who he was, and I was trapped. She looked at him. "You want to know why I really ran after he died?" "Why?" "Because I was afraid I'd become him. Afraid I'd teach my children that love meant pain, that they deserved to be hurt, that they should accept cruelty as normal." Her voice broke. "I couldn't let them grow up thinking that's what love looks like." "It's not," Jim said firmly. "Love is what you do every day. Protecting them, feeding them, teaching them they deserve better." "Is that what you're doing? Teaching us we deserve better?" "I'm trying." Sarah shifted closer. Not touching, but close enough that Jim could feel her warmth. "I need you to know something. If you change your mind, if this gets too hard, if you decide you can't do this, I need you to tell me. Don't just pull away and let us wonder what we did wrong. My children have had enough of that." "I won't. Promise me, James. Promise me you'll be honest, even if the truth is that you want us gone." Jim looked at her, really looked. Saw the scars she carried, visible and invisible. Saw the strength it took to keep going. Saw the same fear he felt reflected back at him. "I promise," he said, "but I don't want you gone." "Then what do you want?" "I don't know yet, but I'm willing to find out if you are." Sarah smiled, small, tentative, real. "Okay." They sat together until the stars began to fade. Then Jim stood, offered his hand, helped her up. Their fingers lingered together for a moment longer than necessary. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow we start building." "Tomorrow?" she echoed. Jim climbed down the ladder, walked back to the house. Didn't look back because if he did, he'd never leave. Inside, Margaret's ghost was waiting by the fire. "I know," he told her. "I'm doing it. I'm trying." The ghost smiled, then faded. And for the first time in 7 years, Jim went to bed and didn't dream of death. Morning came cold and clear. Jim woke before dawn, his body moving on instinct. Coffee, breakfast, work, the familiar rhythm of survival. But when he walked into the kitchen, Sarah was already there. Coffee made, breakfast cooking, moving through his space like she'd always been there. "Morning," she said, not turning around. "Morning." Jim poured coffee. "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to." She slid eggs onto plates. "Besides, if we're building today, we need a good breakfast." Tommy and Rose appeared moments later, faces bright with excitement. Rose climbed into a chair, swinging her feet. Tommy stood beside Jim, waiting for instructions like a soldier awaiting orders. "Today's the day," the boy asked. "Today's the day." They ate quickly. Jim showed Tommy how to organize tools, how to carry lumber without getting splinters, how to measure twice and cut once. Rose helped by staying out of the way and singing encouragement. Sarah worked beside Jim like they'd been building together for years. She didn't flinch at hard work, didn't complain. Just set her jaw and lifted boards and hammered nails with the strength of someone who'd learned that survival meant being tougher than your circumstances. By midday, the foundation was laid. By evening, the frame was up. Jim stepped back, surveying their work. The skeleton of a room. Bones that would become a home. "It's real," Tommy whispered. "Not yet," Jim said. "But it will be." They worked for 6 days straight, dawn to dusk, building. Jim taught Tommy everything he knew. The boy learned fast, his small hands becoming confident, capable. Rose painted rocks to mark the corners of the room, turning work into art. Sarah matched Jim board for board, her strength surprising him, her determination humbling him. On the 7th day, they rested. Not because God demanded it, but because their bodies did. Jim woke late, his muscles screaming. Found the house empty. Panic hit him like a fist. They'd left. He'd scared them away. He'd been too much or not enough or... Then he heard laughter from outside. Jim stumbled to the window. Sarah and the children were in the yard. Tommy was teaching Rose how to throw. Sarah was hanging laundry on the line Jim hadn't used in 7 years. Ordinary, domestic, beautiful. Jim's chest hurt. He walked outside slowly. Tommy saw him first. "Jim, watch this." The boy threw. The rock sailed 10 feet. Rose clapped. Sarah turned, saw Jim, and smiled. That smile hit harder than any punch he'd ever taken. "Sleep well?" she asked. "Yeah." He couldn't stop looking at her. At them. At this strange, fragile thing growing between them. "You... better than I have in years." "Mama says the room will be done in 2 days," Rose announced, running over. "Is that true?" Jim looked at the partially built structure. Walls up, roof joists ready, windows waiting to be installed. "Maybe 3. 3 days until we have a real room." Rose's eyes went wide. "A room that's ours." "A room that's yours," Rose squealed, hugged his leg, ran back to her mother, chattering about curtains and where her bed would go and whether they could get a rug. Tommy approached more cautiously. "Jim, can I ask you something?" "Always." "After the room's done, are we staying for real?" Jim knelt down, eye level with the boy. "Do you want to stay? More than anything?" "Then yeah. For real." Tommy's face crumpled. He launched himself at Jim's arms, wrapping around his neck, small body shaking. Jim caught him, held him, felt the boy's tears soaking into his shirt. "It's okay," Jim murmured. "You're safe. All of you. I promise." "Papa used to promise things too," Tommy whispered. "And then he'd hurt us." Jim's heart broke. He pulled back, held Tommy's shoulders. "Look at me. I will never hurt you. Not you, not your sister, not your mother. You understand? Never. How do I know you mean it? Because I'm still here. Because I'm building you a room instead of sending you away. Because, his voice cracked, because I know what it's like to be broken, and I won't do that to anyone else, especially not you. Tommy searched his face, looking for the lie, the trap, the moment adults always betrayed you. But Jim held his gaze steady, letting the boy see everything, the grief, the fear, the desperate, terrifying hope. Finally, Tommy nodded. Okay, I believe you. Good. Jim squeezed his shoulders, stood. Now go help your sister before she throws a rock through my window. Tommy laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He ran back to Rose, and Jim stood there watching them, feeling something dangerous growing in his chest. Love. He was falling in love with these people, with this makeshift family, with the idea that maybe, just maybe, he deserved a second chance. You're smiling, Sarah said, appearing beside him. Am I? It's a good look on you. Jim turned to her. They stood closer than was proper, breathing the same cold air. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Okay? I don't know how to do this, any of this. I've been alone so long I've forgotten how to be a person. So have I. But I want to try. He stopped. Started again. I want you to stay. Not just until the room's done. Not just for winter. I want you here, permanent, if you'll have me. Have this life. Sarah kissed him. It wasn't much, just a brush of lips. Quick, tentative, over before he could respond, but it burned through him like wildfire. Is that a yes? He asked, his voice rough. That's a, maybe ask me properly after the room's done, and we've survived winter together, and we're sure this isn't just convenience or loneliness or... Jim kissed her back, longer this time, deeper, tasting coffee and hope, and the promise of something worth fighting for. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. That's still my answer, Sarah whispered. But she was smiling. Fair enough. They stood there, foreheads together, while Tommy and Rose played in the yard, and the mountains watched, and the ghosts of their dead finally stopped screaming. 3 days later, the room was finished. Roof solid, walls painted, windows installed, 2 beds built by hand, a small stove for heat. Curtains Sarah had sewn from fabric Jim bought in town, ignoring the stares and whispers. They stood in the doorway together. Jim, Sarah, Tommy, Rose. A family. Maybe. Almost. If they were brave enough to claim it. It's perfect, Rose breathed. It's ours, Tommy asked, still not quite believing. Jim knelt down, pulled out his knife, carved into the doorframe right there in front of them. Thomas and Rose Mitchell, 1878 home. He stood, looked at Sarah. Permanent enough? Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded. Couldn't speak. Just pulled him close, and he wrapped his arms around her, and the children grabbed them both, and they stood there in the doorway of the room they'd built together, holding on like they could make the moment last forever. Outside, snow began to fall, the first snow of winter. It would be a hard season, but they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. The snow kept falling, 3 inches, 6, a foot. Winter came early and fierce that year, like it was testing them, seeing if this fragile new thing they'd built could survive the cold. Jim woke on the 8th morning to find Sarah already gone from the barn loft. She'd been sleeping there, still maintaining propriety, even though the whole arrangement was already improper by any town standard. He found her in the main house, staring at the stove like it held answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. "Coffee's ready?" she said without turning. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." She poured 2 cups, handed him one. Her fingers brushed his. Neither of them pulled away. "We need to talk about supplies." "What about them?" "We're running low. Flour, sugar, coffee. Basic things." She met his eyes. Someone needs to go to town. Jim's jaw tightened. I'll go. They'll ask questions. Let them. Jim. Sarah set down her cup. You know what they'll say, what they'll think. An unmarried woman living with an unmarried man, children involved. The town won't. I don't give a damn what the town thinks. Maybe you should. Her voice was quiet, but firm. Because if they decide we're immoral, they can take my children. The law's on their side, not ours. Jim's hands curled into fists. They won't touch those kids. How will you stop them? With what legal standing? You're not their father. I'm not your wife. We're nothing to each other in the eyes of the law. She looked away. We're just people living in sin. The words hung heavy. Jim wanted to argue, wanted to say it didn't matter what the law said, what the town thought. But he'd seen it before. Women losing their children because some judge decided their living situation was unfit. Men hanged for less than harboring a widow without a chaperone. What do you want me to do? He asked. I don't know. Sarah's voice cracked. I just know I can't lose them. I can't. Jim crossed the space between them, took her shoulders, made her look at him. You won't. I promise you, Sarah. They'll have to go through me first. That's what I'm afraid of. Tears spilled down her cheeks. What if they hurt you? What if standing up for us costs you everything? I already lost everything once. I survived. I'll survive again if I have to. But I don't want you to have to. She grabbed his shirt. I don't want you to suffer because of us. Too late. You're already under my skin, all three of you. He wiped her tears with his thumb. So we figure this out. Together. The door burst open. Tommy stood there, face white, breathing hard. Jim. There's riders coming. 3 of them. Jim's blood went cold. How far? Maybe 10 minutes. Get your mother and sister into the back room. Now. But. Now, Tommy. The boy ran. Sarah grabbed Jim's arm. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to. He moved to the door, grabbed his rifle from above the frame. Checked the chamber. 6 rounds. He hoped he wouldn't need them. James. Sarah's voice stopped him. Don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Getting killed for us. He looked back at her, memorized her face just in case. Go. Keep the children quiet. Don't come out until I say. She nodded, disappeared into the back. Jim heard the soft sounds of her gathering the children, her voice low and soothing. Then silence. Jim walked onto the porch. The riders appeared through the snow like ghosts. 3 of them, just like Tommy said. Jim recognized them immediately. Martha Blackwood rode in front, sitting her horse like a queen surveying a conquered kingdom. Beside her was Silas Thornton, the town clerk who'd proposed to Sarah. Behind them, Sheriff Edmund Price, hand resting on his pistol. They stopped 20 feet from the porch. Martha spoke first. Mr. Caldwell, we need to have a conversation. About what? About the situation you've created here. She looked at the house, the barn, the fresh lumber of the new room. We've heard disturbing reports. A woman and children living on your property. No marriage, no chaperone. It's caused quite the scandal. Nobody's business but mine. That's where you're wrong. Silas leaned forward in his saddle. When children are involved, it becomes the community's business. Their moral welfare must be considered. Their moral welfare. Jim's voice was dangerously quiet. They were starving when they got here. Dying. You want to talk about morality? Where were you good Christian folks when this woman was walking 3 days through snow with nothing but the clothes on her back? Martha's face hardened. We can't help those we don't know about. But you know now, and instead of offering help, you're offering judgment. We're offering a solution. Silas dismounted. Mrs. Mitchell can marry me, properly. The children will have a father, a proper home. Everything made respectable. She doesn't want to marry you. How do you know? Have you asked her? I don't need to. I've seen the way she looks when you're mentioned. Silas's face flushed. You're keeping her here against her will. That's a lie. Is it? Martha joined in. A woman alone, desperate, no resources. You offer shelter in exchange for what exactly? Her body? Her children's labor? Jim's grip tightened on the rifle. Watch your mouth, or what you'll shoot us. Sheriff Price spoke for the first time. That'd just prove you're the kind of man we think you are. And what kind is that? The kind who takes advantage of desperate women. The door opened behind Jim. Sarah stepped out, children flanking her. Jim's heart sank. He'd told her to stay inside. That's enough. Her voice cut through the cold air like steel. Mr. Caldwell has done nothing but show us kindness. He's fed us, sheltered us, built my children a room. He's asked for nothing in return. Nothing. Martha's eyebrow arched. And where exactly do you sleep, Mrs. Mitchell? The barn loft, with my children, where we've slept since we arrived. How convenient. And we're expected to believe nothing improper has occurred. Sarah's face went white with rage. Believe what you want. I know the truth. The truth is you're living in sin. Silas stepped forward. My offer still stands. Marry me. Save yourself and your children from this shame. I'd rather die. The words rang out clear and final. Silas recoiled like he'd been slapped. Martha's face twisted with something ugly. Then perhaps your children should be placed somewhere more appropriate, she said. A Christian household, somewhere their moral education won't be corrupted. Tommy grabbed his mother's hand. Rose started crying. Sarah went rigid. You're not taking my children. That's not your decision to make. Sheriff Price dismounted. I've got papers here, signed by Judge Morrison. Gives us authority to remove children from unfit living situations. He pulled folded documents from his coat. Jim's vision went red. Those papers aren't worth the ink they're printed on. They're legal and binding. On whose word a bitter widow and a rejected suitor? Jim stepped forward. This isn't about the children's welfare. This is revenge, pure and simple. Mind your place, Caldwell. The sheriff's hand dropped to his gun. This doesn't concern you. Everything on this land concerns me. You have no legal claim to these people. Then I'll make one. The words were out before Jim could stop them. He turned to Sarah. Marry me. Silence, complete and absolute. Sarah stared at him, mouth open. The children looked between them. Martha made a sound of disgust. What? Sarah whispered. Marry me. Right now. In front of witnesses. Jim looked at the sheriff. That satisfy your legal concerns. You can't just... Martha started. Why not? You want her married. I'm proposing. Sheriff here can officiate. It's legal in the territory. This is insane, Silas said. You barely know each other. I know enough. Jim's eyes never left Sarah. I know she's strong. I know she's a good mother. I know she makes the best coffee I've ever had and can swing a hammer better than most men. That's enough for me. Sarah. He said her name like a prayer. I'm not asking for love. I'm not even asking for forever. I'm asking you to let me protect you, legally. So nobody can take your children. So you never have to be afraid again. James, her voice broke. You can't marry me out of pity. It's not pity. Then what is it? He wanted to say, love, wanted to tell her that somewhere between that first breakfast and building the room, between teaching Tommy to hammer and watching Rose paint rocks, he'd fallen completely and irrevocably in love with all three of them. But the words stuck in his throat, too big, too terrifying. It's the right thing to do, he said instead. Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Disappointment, maybe, but also relief. She looked at her children. Tommy nodded frantically. Rose was still crying, but she reached for Jim's hand. Okay, Sarah said quietly. Okay, I'll marry you. Martha exploded. This is a farce, Sheriff. You can't allow this. Why not? Price looked almost amused. They're both of age, both willing. I got the authority to perform the ceremony right here. Solves the legal problem neat and clean. But, unless you want to admit this was never about the children's welfare. The sheriff's expression hardened. Was it Mrs. Blackwood? Martha's mouth opened and closed. Silas looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Finally, Martha jerked her horse around. Fine, marry her. But don't expect the town to accept this. Don't expect invitations or kindness or Christian charity when winter gets hard and you realize you've shackled yourself to used goods and another man's brats. Jim moved faster than thought, crossed the space, grabbed her horse's bridle. His voice came out low and deadly. You ever call them that again, I'll forget you're a woman. You dare threaten me? That's not a threat, that's a promise. He released the bridle. Now get off my land. Martha and Silas left at a gallop. The sheriff watched them go, then turned back to Jim and Sarah. You two sure about this? Jim looked at Sarah. She looked back. They were standing at the edge of a cliff about to jump, no idea if there was water below or rocks. Yeah, Jim said. We're sure. All right then. Price pulled out a small prayer book. Let's make this legal. The ceremony took 5 minutes. No flowers, no music, no celebration. Just two people standing in the snow promising things they weren't sure they could deliver, witnessed by a skeptical sheriff and two confused children. Do you, James Caldwell, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Sarah Mitchell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Sarah's hand trembled in Jim's. I do. By the power vested in me by the Wyoming Territory, I pronounce you man and wife. Price closed the book. You can kiss her if you want, or not. Up to you. Jim looked at Sarah. They hadn't discussed this part. Hadn't discussed any of it, really. This whole thing was insane, impulsive, probably a mistake. He kissed her anyway. It was nothing like the kiss by the barn. That had been gentle, tentative. This was desperate, claiming. Sealing a deal they'd both just made with their eyes wide open and their hearts terrified. When they pulled apart, Sarah was crying. Tommy was grinning. Rose was clapping. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. I'll file the papers in town, Price said. You're legal now. Ain't nobody can touch those kids. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Martha Blackwood's got influence. She'll make your life hell if she can. Let her try. The sheriff tipped his hat, mounted up, and rode away. The four of them stood in the yard, snow falling around them, the weight of what they'd just done settling in. So, Tommy said finally, does this mean you're our pa now? Jim's throat closed up. He looked at Sarah. She nodded. Permission granted. If you'll have me, Jim said. Tommy threw himself at Jim, arms wrapping tight. Rose followed. Jim knelt, catching them both, holding these children who weren't his by blood, but were becoming his by choice. Sarah watched tears streaming down her face. Jim reached out, pulled her in too, and they stood there in a tight circle. A family made not by birth or law, but by desperate need and foolish hope. What do we do now? Sarah whispered. We go inside, Jim said. We get warm. We figure out the rest as we go. They went inside. Jim built up the fire while Sarah made coffee with shaking hands. The children disappeared into their new room voices' quiet processing. Jim and Sarah sat at the table, married now, legal now, and had no idea what to say to each other. I'm sorry, Jim said finally. For what? For proposing like that. You deserved better. Flowers, romance, a choice. You gave me a choice. Did I trap you? Sarah reached across the table, took his hand. James, look at me. He looked. You saved us, again. I'm not trapped. I'm grateful. I don't want gratitude. Then what do you want? The question hung there. Jim could say it now, could tell her the truth, that he wanted her, really wanted her, not just as a convenience or a legal protection, but as a partner, a companion, maybe even as something more. I want you to be happy, he said instead. Coward. Sarah's expression flickered. She pulled her hand back. Right, of course. Sarah. It's fine. We both know what this is, a practical arrangement, nothing more. Is that what you want it to be? Does it matter? Yes. She stood, started washing dishes that didn't need washing. We should set some ground rules, separate sleeping arrangements, no expectations of marital relations. This is a legal arrangement only. Every word hit Jim like a punch. If that's what you want. It's what makes sense. To hell with sense. Jim stood. Sarah, look at me. She didn't turn. I married you because they were going to take your children. That's true. But I also married you because I wanted to. Because the thought of you leaving, of losing you and Tommy and Rose, made me feel like I was dying again. He moved closer. So, if you want separate sleeping arrangements, fine. If you want this to be purely legal, fine. But don't stand there and tell me it's what makes sense, when we both know we stopped making sense the moment you fell asleep on my porch. Sarah's shoulders shook. She was crying again. Jim reached for her, hesitated, then wrapped his arms around her from behind. She leaned into him. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. What if this doesn't work? What if it does? She turned in his arms. They were so close, Jim could count her freckles, could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, could feel her breath on his face. I want it to work, she said. God help me, I want this to be real. Then let's make it real. How? One day at a time, one moment at a time. He touched her face. No expectations, no pressure, just us figuring it out together. You make it sound simple. It's probably not. Probably complicated as hell. But I'm willing to try if you are. Sarah studied his face, looking for the lie, the trap. The moment he'd reveal this was all just pity or obligation. But Jim had nothing left to hide. He was raw and exposed and terrified, and he let her see all of it. Okay, she said finally. We try. They sealed it with a kiss. Slower this time, gentler. A promise instead of a claim. The children emerged from their room. Tommy looked between them. Are you fighting? No, Sarah said. We're figuring things out. Does that mean Jim's really our pa? Jim knelt down. Do you want me to be? Tommy nodded so hard his whole body moved. Rose climbed onto Jim's back. Papa. She tested the word. Papa, Papa, Papa. Jim's vision blurred. These children, this woman, this life he'd stumbled into by accident and was now choosing on purpose. Yeah, little one, he said. I'm your papa now. That night they had their first dinner as a married family. It was simple, stew and bread. But it felt significant. Tommy said grace, stumbling over the words, but meaning every one. Rose fell asleep at the table. Jim carried her to bed, tucked her in, felt his heart crack open when she mumbled, "Love you, Papa," in her sleep. Sarah stood in the doorway watching. When Jim turned, he found her crying again. Happy tears, she said before he could ask. For once, happy tears. They put Tommy to bed next. The boy fought sleep, afraid if he closed his eyes, all of this would disappear. Jim sat on the edge of his bed. It's real, son. We're not going anywhere. Promise. Promise. Even when I'm bad, even when I mess up. Jim's heart broke. Especially then. Tommy's eyes closed. Within minutes, he was asleep. Jim and Sarah stood in the doorway of the children's room, watching them breathe alive and safe in theirs. Where do we sleep? Sarah asked quietly. Jim had been wondering the same thing. They were married now. Legally, she could sleep in his bed. But he'd promised no expectations, no pressure. "You can have my bed," he said. "I'll take the floor." "That's ridiculous." "It's fine." "James." She turned to face him. "We're adults. We can share a bed without... "You sure?" "No. But I'm tired of being afraid of everything." They prepared for bed in awkward silence. Jim gave Sarah privacy to change. When he returned, she was under the covers on the far edge of the bed, wrapped so tight she might as well have been in a cocoon. Jim climbed in on his side, left 3 feet of space between them. They lay there in the dark, both rigid, both aware of every breath, every movement. "This is weird," Sarah said. "Yeah." "Are we going to do this every night?" "Probably gets less weird." "Or more weird." Despite everything, Jim laughed. Sarah joined in. The tension broke. They lay there giggling like children until their sides hurt. "We're ridiculous," Sarah said. "Completely." The laughter faded. Silence settled. Jim could hear her breathing, could feel the warmth of her body even across the distance. His hand rested on the bed between them. Sarah's hand moved, inched across the space, found his, their fingers laced together. "Good night, husband," she whispered. Jim's chest tightened. "Good night, wife." They fell asleep like that, holding hands, not touching otherwise. 2 people learning how to be close again after years of isolation and pain. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the fire burned low. And for the first time in 7 years, Jim Caldwell slept through the night without nightmares. He dreamed of Margaret. She stood in a meadow filled with wildflowers, Emma beside her, both of them translucent in the golden light. "You did good, James," Margaret said. "I miss you." "I know, but it's time to let go." "I don't know how." "Yes, you do." She smiled. "You're already doing it." Emma waved. "Bye, Papa. Love you." "I love you too, baby girl." They faded. Not gone exactly, just at peace. Jim woke with tears on his face and Sarah's hand still in his. She was awake watching him. "Bad dream." "No," he said. "The opposite." She didn't ask what he meant, just squeezed his hand, and Jim squeezed back. They were married now, legal now. But more than that, they were choosing each other. Every day, every moment, building something real from the wreckage of their broken lives. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was theirs, and that was enough. Winter tightened its grip. 2 weeks passed after the wedding, and Jim learned what it meant to be a husband again, a father for the first time. He learned that Rose sang when she was happy and went silent when she was scared. That Tommy had nightmares about his real father and would wake up swinging. That Sarah talked in her sleep, mostly apologies to people who weren't there anymore. He learned to sleep with one hand touching Sarah, just enough contact to remind them both they weren't alone. He learned to check Tommy's room 3 times a night, making sure the boy was breathing, was safe, wasn't running. He learned that Rose wouldn't eat eggs unless they were scrambled, that Tommy hated carrots, but would choke them down to prove he was tough. He learned that being a family wasn't about blood. It was about showing up every single day, every single day. They were having breakfast when the first stone hit the window. The glass cracked but didn't shatter. Tommy jumped. Rose screamed. Sarah was on her feet instantly, grabbing both children, pulling them away from the window. Jim grabbed his rifle, moved to the door. "Stay inside." "James, don't." He was already outside. 4 men on horses at the edge of his property. Not close enough to be an immediate threat. Close enough to make their point. Jim recognized 2 of them, Silas Thornton, and Martha Blackwood's son Jacob, who Jim had always thought was decent until now. "That's far enough," Jim called out. "This is still a free territory, Caldwell," Jacob called back. "We can ride where we please." "Not on my land." "Your land," Silas laughed. "Bought with what, the devil's money? Everyone knows you've been hoarding gold from your mining days. living up here like a hermit with your stolen fortune while good Christian folks struggle." Jim's jaw clenched. He'd sold his mining claim 8 years ago, bought this land, built this ranch with his own hands. There was no gold, no fortune. Just hard work and grief. "Get off my property, or what you'll shoot us." A third man Jim didn't recognize moved his horse forward. "That'd just prove what we all know. You're a criminal, a deviant, corrupting that poor widow woman and her innocent children. Those children have a father now, me, legal and binding." "A father," Silas spat. "You're a replacement, a poor substitute for a real man. That boy will never respect you, that little girl will never love you, and that woman—" He smiled ugly. "She's just using you until something better comes along." Jim raised the rifle. "Last warning." "James, don't—" Sarah's voice from behind him. She'd come out despite his order. "They're not worth it." "Listen to your woman Caldwell." Jacob's voice had an edge. "Walk away. This doesn't have to get ugly." "You threw a rock at my window, at my children. It's already ugly." "That was a warning. Next time it'll be worse." "There won't be a next time." "You sure about that?" The fourth rider moved forward. Jim saw his face and his blood went cold. Billy Crawford, a known troublemaker, a man who'd spent 3 months in jail for beating a saloon girl half to death. "You brought Crawford." Jim looked at Jacob. "Your mother know you're riding with scum." "My mother knows we're protecting the town's moral fiber. By terrorizing a family. By sending a message." Billy's grin showed missing teeth. "You ain't welcome here, Caldwell. Neither is your whore wife or her bastard children." Jim fired. The bullet kicked up dirt 6 inches from Billy's horse. The animal reared. Billy nearly fell off cursing. "Next one goes through you," Jim said calmly. The 4 men exchanged glances. Sarah was beside Jim now, her hand on his arm. "Please, let them go. Don't make this worse. They started it, and we can finish it by walking away. Walking away makes us victims. Fighting makes us targets." She looked at him with those eyes that saw too much. "Please, James, for the children." Jim lowered the rifle. Not because he wanted to, because she was right. The 4 riders sat there waiting to see what he'd do. Finally, Silas spoke. "Smart choice. But understand this, Caldwell. We'll be watching. One mistake, one slip, one hint that those children are being mistreated or corrupted, and we'll be back. With the law, with the judge. And next time we won't leave empty-handed." They rode off. Jim stood there, rage boiling in his chest. Sarah's hand still on his arm, anchoring him. "They're not going to stop," she said quietly. "I know. They're going to make our lives hell until we leave, or until we're not leaving. James. This is our home. Those are our children. We're not running." Sarah turned him to face her. "I've been running for 6 months. I know what it looks like. And I know what happens when you stop running and start fighting. People get hurt. People die. You want me to just let them terrorize us? I want you to be smart." Smart would have been never opening my door that first morning. The words came out harsher than he meant. Sarah flinched like he'd hit her. Jim immediately regretted it. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Her voice went flat. "You meant every word. We're a burden, a complication. And now that burden includes threats and violence and—" "Sarah, stop. Why, it's true. You were safe before us. Alone, but safe. Now you're married to a woman you don't love, raising children who aren't yours, fighting battles you never asked for." Tears streamed down her face. "Maybe they're right. Maybe we should leave." "No." Jim grabbed her shoulders. "No. You're not leaving. I won't let you. You can't stop us. Watch me." His voice broke. "Sarah, I married you because I wanted to. I'm fighting for you because I choose to. Those children in there, They're mine now. By law, by choice, by every measure that matters. And I will burn this whole territory down before I let anyone take them. Even if it costs you everything. I already told you. I lost everything once. I survived. But losing you," he pulled her close, "losing you and Tommy and Rose, that would actually kill me." Sarah collapsed against him, sobbing. Jim held her while she broke, while she let out all the fear and exhaustion and terror she'd been holding in. The door opened. Tommy stood there, Rose hiding behind him, both children pale and scared. "Are they coming back?" Tommy asked. Jim looked at his son. His son. When had that happened? When had this boy become his in more than just legal paper? Maybe, probably, but it doesn't matter. Why not? Because we're stronger than they are. How do you know? Because we have something worth fighting for. They just have hate. Jim held out his arm. Tommy ran to him. Rose followed. They stood there in a tight circle, Sarah crying. The children scared Jim, holding them all together through sheer will. "What do we do?" Tommy whispered. "We keep living. We don't let them make us afraid. We don't let them win." "But what if they come back with guns? What if they hurt Mama or Rose or—" "They won't get the chance." Jim's voice was steel. "I promise you, son, I will die before I let anyone hurt this family." Tommy looked up at him. "Papa, I don't want you to die." The word hit Jim like lightning. Papa, not Jim, not Mr. Caldwell. Papa, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm not planning on it, kid." Jim ruffled his hair. "But I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to be brave. Can you do that?" Tommy nodded, his small jaw set. "I can be brave." "Good. Because your sister needs you. Your mama needs you. And I need you." "What about you?" "Who do you need?" Jim looked at Sarah. She looked back. "I have everyone I need right here." They went inside. Jim barred the door, checked the windows, loaded extra weapons. Sarah kept the children occupied, reading to them, playing games, pretending everything was normal. But Jim saw the fear in her eyes every time a branch snapped or the wind howled. That night, Tommy's nightmares came back. Jim woke to the sound of screaming. He was in the boys' room before full consciousness caught up. Tommy was thrashing, fighting invisible attackers, crying for his mother. "Tommy! Tommy, wake up! You're safe! I've got you!" Tommy's eyes flew open, wild, terrified. He swung. His fist connected with Jim's jaw. Jim took it, didn't flinch, just held the boy while he fought. "It's me. It's Papa. You're safe." Slowly, Tommy stopped fighting. Recognition filtered through the panic. "Papa?" "Yeah, son. I'm here." Tommy grabbed him. Held on like Jim was the only solid thing in a drowning world. "He was here. My real father. He was hurting Mama again, and I couldn't stop him, and he's gone. He can't hurt anyone anymore. But those men today, they wanted to hurt us. I know. What if they come back? What if they're like him? What if— Then I'll stop them." Jim pulled back, looked Tommy in the eye. "Listen to me. Your father hurt you because he was weak, because he was a coward who only felt strong when he was hurting people smaller than him. I'm not like that. You understand, I will never hurt you, and I will never let anyone else hurt you either. You promise?" "On my life." Tommy studied his face, looking for the lie, the crack, the moment adults always showed you they couldn't be trusted. But Jim held his gaze steady, letting the boy see everything. "Okay," Tommy whispered. "I believe you." Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Is he all right?" "Nightmare." Jim stood, lifted Tommy easily. The boy was light, too light, still recovering from months of hunger. "I've got him." He carried Tommy to his and Sarah's bed, set him down between them. Rose woke up confused, and Sarah brought her too. All four of them in one bed, the children between them, a family huddled together against the dark. Tell us a story, Papa, Rose said sleepily. What kind of story? A happy one. Jim looked at Sarah. She nodded. So Jim told them about Margaret and Emma. Not the death, not the grief, the good parts, the laughter, the love, the ordinary moments that made life worth living. Did you love them? Tommy asked. More than anything. Do you still? Always will? Does that mean you can't love us? Jim's breath caught. Sarah's hand found his across the children's bodies. No, son. That's not how love works. Love doesn't run out. It just grows. Makes room for more. So you love us and them? Yeah, I do. Tommy considered this. Then, good. Because I love you too. Rose echoed it. Love you, Papa. Jim's vision blurred. He looked at Sarah. She was crying again. Happy tears this time. Love you too, little ones, he managed. So much it scares me. They fell asleep like that. A pile of humans taking comfort in proximity and warmth, in the knowledge that they weren't alone. Jim lay awake long after everyone else slept, listening to their breathing, memorizing the weight of them praying to a God he wasn't sure believed in him anymore, that he could keep them safe. Morning came too fast. Jim woke to find Sarah already up making breakfast, moving through the kitchen like a ghost. He knew that look. She was planning something. What are you thinking? He asked. We need supplies, real supplies. Enough to last through winter without going to town. I'll go. They'll recognize you. They'll hassle you. Maybe worse. So, what do you suggest? Sarah turned. I go. Absolutely not. James. You think I'm sending you into town after yesterday? After they called you? He couldn't repeat the words. They made him too angry. They called me worse when Daniel was alive. I survived then. I'll survive now. You had to survive then. You don't now. You have me. And what happens when they provoke you into a fight? When you end up arrested or shot, and I'm left alone with 2 children and no protection? She moved closer. I know you want to protect us, but sometimes protecting means stepping back. I can't let you go alone. Then come with me, but let me do the talking. Jim wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at him to lock her in the house, to go himself to handle this like men had always handled things. But Sarah wasn't asking for his permission. She was telling him how it was going to be. Fine, but I'm armed. And if anyone even looks at you wrong, you'll stay calm and let me handle it. Sarah. Promise me, James. No fighting, no matter what they say. Jim's jaw clenched. I can't promise that. Then we don't go at all. They stared at each other. A battle of wills. 2 stubborn people who'd survived alone, learning how to compromise. I'll try, Jim finally said. That's the best I can do. Good enough. They left the children with instructions to bar the door and not open it for anyone. Tommy had his knife. Rose had instructions to hide under her bed. Neither child wanted them to go, but Sarah was firm. We'll be back before dark. Be brave. The ride to town took an hour. Jim and Sarah didn't talk much, both of them tense, watching the trees, expecting ambush. But they made it without incident. Town was busier than Jim remembered. People everywhere. Normal life continuing while his world fell apart. They tied their horses at the general store. Jim helped Sarah down. Her hand lingered in his. Remember. Calm. I remember. They walked in together. The store went silent. Every eye turned to them. Jim felt Sarah stiffen beside him, but she kept walking head high, moving to the counter like she owned the place. Mrs. Caldwell. The clerk's voice was carefully neutral. What can I do for you? I need supplies. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt. Enough for 3 months. That's a lot of supplies. It's a long winter. The clerk glanced at Jim. Your husband good for the credit. My husband has cash. Sarah set coins on the counter. Real money. Jim had given it to her that morning, the last of his savings. Will this cover it? The clerk counted, nodded. Should do. I'll get your order together. He disappeared into the back. Sarah stood at the counter, rigid, waiting. Jim stood beside her, hyper-aware of every person in the store, every whisper, every stare. Well, well. Martha Blackwood's voice cut through the silence. If it isn't the blushing bride. Sarah didn't turn. Mrs. Blackwood. I must say you move fast. From destitute widow to married woman in a matter of weeks. Quite the accomplishment. I'm a lucky woman. Lucky, is that what we're calling it? Martha moved closer. Jim's hand dropped to his gun. Sarah's hand caught his wrist, held tight. What would you call it? Sarah asked. Opportunistic, manipulative. Exactly what I'd expect from a woman of your background. And what background is that? One that includes a drunk for a husband and bastard children. Sarah's hand tightened on Jim's wrist. He could feel her shaking, could feel his own rage building like a wildfire. My children are legitimate, Sarah said quietly, and my husband was their father. Whatever else he was doesn't change that. And what is your current husband? Besides a fool who fell for a pretty face and a sob story. Jim stepped forward. Sarah's nails dug into his wrist. He's a good man, Sarah said. Better than I deserve. Better than this town deserves. A good man who harbors fugitives. Fugitives. Sarah's voice stayed level. I'm a widow who fell on hard times. That's not a crime. No? Then why were you running? What were you hiding from? I was hiding from people like you. People who judge before they know the facts. People who prefer cruelty to compassion. Martha's face flushed. You dare speak to me about cruelty? You who corrupted a good man, turned him against his community, isolated him on that ranch like some kind of hermit king. I corrupted no one. James made his own choices. Because you manipulated him. Used your feminine wiles and your poor helpless children to... Enough. Jim's voice cut through the store. You want to attack someone, attack me. Leave my wife alone. Your wife. Martha laughed. A wife of convenience. A business arrangement. You don't love her. How could you? You barely know her. You're right. I barely know her. Jim stepped forward, putting himself between Sarah and Martha. But what I do know, she's stronger than anyone I've ever met. She's a better mother than most. She makes a house feel like a home. And yeah, maybe I don't love her yet. But I'm working on it. And when I get there, it'll be real. More real than anything you've ever felt. Silence. Complete and total. Martha's face went white, then red. You'll regret this, Caldwell. Both of you. This territory has no room for people like you. Then maybe we don't want to be part of this territory. Where will you go? Who will take you? You think other towns will be more welcoming to your little arrangement? She leaned in close. You're trapped, both of you, and eventually you'll turn on each other. She'll resent you for not being enough. You'll resent her for needing too much. Those children will grow up warped and broken, and it'll be your fault. Both of you. The clerk reappeared with their supplies. Your order's ready, Mrs. Caldwell. Sarah moved mechanically, started gathering bags. Jim helped her, his hands shaking with suppressed rage. They loaded everything paid and left without another word. Outside, Sarah made it 3 steps before her legs gave out. Jim caught her, held her while she shook. I'm sorry, she gasped. I thought I could handle it. I thought... You did handle it. You were amazing. She said, I don't care what she said. None of it's true. But what if it is? What if we do resent each other? What if the children... Sarah, look at me. He waited until she did. That woman is poison. Everything she said was designed to hurt us. Don't let her win. She already won. She made me doubt us. Then we prove her wrong. Every single day. We wake up and choose each other and build something so strong her words can't touch it. Sarah's eyes searched his. You really think we can do that? I have to believe we can, because the alternative is giving up, and I'm done giving up. They loaded the supplies onto the horses, started the ride home. Halfway there, Sarah spoke. Did you mean it? Mean what? What you said, about working on loving me. Jim's hands tightened on the reins. This was the moment. Tell the truth or keep hiding. He could play it safe, say he meant it as a figure of speech, protect himself from vulnerability. Yeah, he said instead. I meant it. Are you close to getting there? He looked at her, really looked. Saw the woman who'd shown up on his porch dying but defiant. Who'd worked beside him building a room. Who'd married him to protect her children. Who'd faced down Martha Blackwood with nothing but dignity and strength. Sarah, I've been in love with you since the first morning you made me breakfast. She stopped her horse, stared at him. What? You heard me. But you said you told Martha. I lied. To protect you. To protect me. Because admitting it makes it real, and real things can be taken away. His voice cracked. I love you. I love Tommy. I love Rose. And it terrifies me more than anything I've ever felt. But there it is. The truth. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. You love me. Yeah. Why? Because you're strong. Because you're kind. Because you make me want to be better than I am. James. She moved her horse closer. I love you too. You don't have to say that just because. I'm not. I love you. I've been fighting it because I thought it was too soon, too fast, too impossible. But I can't fight it anymore. I love you. They kissed right there on the trail, horses standing patient, the world falling away until it was just them, just this, just the truth they'd both been too afraid to speak. When they pulled apart, they were both crying, both laughing, both terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. What do we do now? Sarah asked. We go home. We tell the children. We figure out the rest as we go. Just like that. Just like that. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was different now. Not tense, not scared. Just two people who'd finally stopped running from the truth. Home appeared over the ridge. Smoke from the chimney. Lights in the windows. Tommy and Rose waiting at the door, relief flooding their faces when they saw their parents returning. Parents. Both of them. Jim and Sarah dismounted. The children ran to them. They caught them, held them, a family complete and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for. Did you get supplies? Tommy asked. We did. Did anyone hurt you? No, son. We're fine. Rose hugged Sarah's legs. I missed you, Mama. Missed you too, baby. They unloaded together, put everything away, made dinner, ate as a family, normal, ordinary, the kind of life Jim had thought he'd lost forever. That night, after the children were asleep, Jim and Sarah lay in bed, not 3 feet apart anymore, pressed together, her head on his chest, his arms around her. I'm still scared, she whispered. Me too. But I'm glad we did this. Me too. James. Yeah. Thank you for fighting for us. Always. He kissed her head. From now until forever, I'll always fight for us. And he meant it. Whatever came next, Martha's schemes, town's judgment, winter's harshness, they'd face it together. Because they were a family now. Real and permanent, and worth every battle ahead. The storm was coming. But for tonight, they were home. They were safe. They were loved. And that was everything. The peace lasted 3 days. Jim woke on the 4th morning to find Tommy standing by the window, knife in hand, staring into the pre-dawn darkness. What is it? Jim kept his voice low, not wanting to wake Sarah or Rose. "Someone's out there." Jim was up instantly, rifle in hand. "Where?" "By the barn. I saw movement. Could be an animal, but you don't think so?" "No, sir." Jim moved to the window, scanned the yard. Nothing. Just snow and shadows, and the kind of silence that felt wrong. Too still. Like the world was holding its breath. "Wake your mother. Quietly. Get Rose into the back room. Bar the door from inside." "What about you?" "I'm going to check it out." "Papa, don't. What if it's a trap?" Jim looked at his son, 9 years old and already thinking like a soldier. It broke his heart and made him proud in equal measure. "Then I'll spring it before they bring it to us. Go." Tommy hesitated, then nodded, moved silently to wake Sarah. Jim watched him go, this boy who'd become his in every way that mattered, then turned back to the window. Movement. There. By the woodpile. Definitely human. Jim's jaw clenched. He checked his rifle-pocketed extra ammunition and moved to the door. Sarah caught his arm. "Where are you going?" "We've got visitors." "How many?" "Don't know yet. Could be one. Could be more." "Then you're not going alone." She was already reaching for the shotgun above the fireplace. "Sarah." "Don't. We're partners now. That means we face things together." She loaded the shotgun with practiced hands. "Besides, you'll need someone watching your back." Jim wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in the house where she'd be safe, but the set of her jaw told him it would be a waste of breath. "Fine. But you stay behind me. And if shooting starts, you run back to the children. Understood?" "Understood." They moved out together. The cold hit like a fist. Jim's breath fogged in the air. He kept the rifle up, scanning Sarah close behind him. They reached the barn. The door was open. Jim knew he'd closed it last night. "Someone's been inside," he whispered. "The horses?" They moved in quickly. The horses were still there, nervous but unharmed. But someone had definitely been through their things. Supplies moved, tools disturbed, nothing taken as far as Jim could tell. Just touched. Violated. "What are they looking for?" Sarah asked. "I don't think they're looking. I think they're sending a message." A sound behind them. They spun. Silas Thornton stood in the barn doorway, hands raised, unarmed as far as Jim could see. "Easy. I'm not here to fight." Jim kept the rifle level. "Then why are you here?" "To warn you. You need to leave Caldwell. Tonight if possible." "Why?" "Because Martha Blackwood isn't done with you. She's been to the territorial judge, filed a complaint. Claims you're unfit guardians, that the children are in danger." Sarah's breath caught. "That's a lie." "I know. But she's got half the town backing her story. Says you're living in squalor. That the children show signs of abuse. That Sarah's unstable, James is violent." Silas looked genuinely troubled. "Judge Morrison's riding out here tomorrow. With the sheriff. They're going to inspect the property, interview the children. And if they find any evidence, any excuse at all, they'll take Tommy and Rose." Jim's world tilted. "On what grounds?" "Martha's claiming Tommy has unexplained bruises. That Rose is malnourished. That Sarah shows signs of being held against her will." "That's insane. We just saw them in town 3 days ago. They were fine." "Martha says that was before. That things have deteriorated since. That you've become violent, abusive." Silas moved closer. "Look, I know it's all lies. But Morrison's inclined to believe her. He owes the Blackwood family favors, and he's looking for an excuse to make an example of you." "Why?" Sarah's voice shook. "What did we do to deserve this? You embarrassed her, made her look foolish. Martha Blackwood doesn't forgive that." Silas looked at Jim. "Take the children and run. Tonight. Head to Colorado or Montana. Start over somewhere they don't know you." "We're not running." "Then you'll lose. Morrison will take those kids. Put them in an orphanage or worse, give them to a family he approves of. You'll never see them again." Jim's hands tightened on the rifle. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to stand his ground, to dare them to try. But he looked at Sarah and saw the fear in her eyes, the memories of everything she'd already lost. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Judge arrives at noon tomorrow, maybe 14 hours. Silas backed toward the door. "I shouldn't have come. If anyone finds out I warned you." "Why did you?" Sarah asked. "Why help us?" Silas stopped, looked at them both. "Because I was wrong. About a lot of things. I thought I was protecting the town's morals. Really, I was just helping Martha Blackwood punish people who didn't bow to her." He tipped his hat. "Good luck. You're going to need it." He disappeared into the darkness. Jim and Sarah stood in the barn, the weight of his words crushing them. "We have to run," Sarah whispered. "James, we have to take the children and go, right now." "No. They'll take them. You heard Silas. The judge is going to take my babies." "Our babies. And no, he's not." "How can you stop him? He has the law on his side." "Then we change the law." Jim turned to her. "Or we give him nothing to find." "What do you mean?" "We clean this place until it shines. We make sure Tommy and Rose look healthy, happy, well cared for. We prepare them for questions. And we document everything. Receipts from town, proof we've been providing for them, witnesses who can testify." "What witnesses? The whole town hates us." "Not the whole town. Silas just proved that." Jim started moving, his mind racing. "The clerk at the general store. He saw us buying supplies. Doc Hayes, she's fair-minded. Reverend Horn, he performed our wedding. They can testify we're fit parents. And if they won't, then we fight anyway. But I'm not running, Sarah. I'm done running from bullies and judges and people who think they can dictate how we live our lives." He grabbed her shoulders. "We're going to stand here in our home with our children, and we're going to dare them to try to take what's ours." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "What if we lose? Then we lose fighting, together." She searched his face, looking for certainty he didn't feel, but was determined to fake. Finally she nodded. "Okay, we fight." They worked through the night, cleaned the house until it gleamed, washed the children's clothes, made sure there was plenty of food visible. Jim repaired the cracked window, fixed loose boards, made everything look as respectable and stable as possible. Sarah prepared the children, explained that people would come asking questions, that they needed to tell the truth but be smart about how they told it. "What if they ask about Papa Daniel?" Tommy asked quietly. Sarah knelt down. "You tell them your father died. You tell them it was hard, but you don't tell them about the hitting." Tommy's voice was flat. "I know, Mama. We're not supposed to talk about that. Not because it didn't happen, but because some people won't understand. They'll twist it, use it against us. That's not fair." "No, it's not. But fair doesn't matter right now. Keeping our family together matters." Rose tugged Sarah's sleeve. "Are they going to take us away from Papa? Not if we're smart. Not if we're brave." "I can be brave." Rose's small jaw set. "Papa taught me." Jim's throat closed. He knelt beside Sarah. "Listen to me, both of you. Tomorrow people are going to try to scare you. They're going to ask hard questions. They might say mean things about your mama or me. But you remember this. We love you. No matter what anyone says, no matter what happens, we love you. And we're fighting to keep you. Understand?" Both children nodded. Tommy looked older than his years. Rose looked terrified, but determined. "Good. Now get some sleep. We need you rested tomorrow." The children went to bed. Jim and Sarah worked until dawn. When the sun rose, the house looked perfect. Clean. Stable. The picture of domestic tranquility. Jim just hoped it would be enough. "I'm scared," Sarah whispered as they waited. "Me too." "What if they separate us? What if they take the children and I never see them again?" "That won't happen." "You can't promise that." "I can promise I'll fight with everything I have, that I'll burn this whole territory down before I let them take our family." He pulled her close. "We've survived worse. We'll survive this." "I love you," she said into his chest. "I love you too." The riders appeared at noon exactly. Judge Morrison led them. Sheriff Price rode beside him. Behind them, Martha Blackwood on her horse, a satisfied smile on her face. And two men Jim didn't recognize, probably there as official witnesses. Jim and Sarah stood on the porch, children behind them. A united front. "Mr. Caldwell? Mrs. Caldwell." The judge's voice was formal, cold. "I'm Judge Morrison. I'm here to conduct an inspection of your home and interview your children." "On what grounds?" Jim kept his voice level. "Concerns have been raised about the children's welfare." "By whom?" "That's not your concern. It is when you're threatening to take our children based on lies." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "You're awfully defensive for an innocent man." "I'm protective. There's a difference." "We'll see." Morrison dismounted. "I'll need to speak with the children, separately, without you present." "No." Sarah stepped forward. "You want to interview them, you do it with us there." "That's not how this works." "Then you're not interviewing them at all." Morrison looked at the sheriff. "Remove the parents." Price moved forward. Jim raised his rifle, not pointing at anyone, just present. "Touch my wife, and we're going to have a problem. You're threatening an officer of the law." "I'm protecting my family from harassment." They stood at an impasse. Morrison's face reddened. Martha spoke from her horse. "This is exactly what I told you, Judge. He's violent, unstable. Those children are living in fear." "Are you children?" Morrison called out. "Are you afraid of Mr. Caldwell?" Rose stepped forward, small but fierce. "No, Papa keeps us safe." "Papa?" Morrison's eyebrow raised. "He's not your father." "Yes, he is." Tommy joined his sister. "He married our mama. He takes care of us. He teaches me things. He loves us. That makes him our papa." Morrison studied them both. Jim could see him looking for signs of coaching, of fear of anything he could use. But Tommy and Rose stood tall, holding hands, telling the simple truth. "I'd like to see the house," Morrison said. "Fine." Sarah opened the door. "But we're coming with you." They all went inside. Morrison walked through, slowly inspecting everything. The clean kitchen, the stocked pantry, the children's room with their beds, their toys, their drawings on the wall. He looked in every corner, every closet, searching for something to condemn. He found nothing. "The children look healthy," he admitted grudgingly. "Because they are," Jim said, "and the house is clean. We take care of what's ours." Morrison turned to Martha. "You said they were living in squalor. They must have cleaned up before you arrived." Martha's voice had an edge of desperation. "But I've seen it before. Filthy. Dangerous." "When?" Sarah challenged. "When have you seen our home? I don't need to see it to know." "So you lied. To a judge. To try to steal our children." Sarah's voice was steel. "That's slander. Defamation. And if you cost me my family based on lies, I will spend the rest of my life making you pay for it." Martha's face went white, then red. "You can't threaten me." "It's not a threat. It's a promise." Morrison held up his hand. "Enough, both of you." He looked at Jim and Sarah. "I'll need character references. People who can vouch for your fitness as parents." "We have them." Jim pulled out papers. Names, statements, signatures he'd collected before dawn by writing to every decent person he knew and begging them to help. The store clerk, Doc Hayes, even Reverend Horn, who'd written a lengthy testimony about the wedding, about seeing the family together, about believing they were genuine. Morrison read through them slowly. His expression shifted from skeptical to thoughtful to resigned. "These are compelling," he admitted. "Because they're true," Sarah said. Morrison looked at Martha. "Do you have evidence to contradict these statements?" "I have my observations." which are biased and self-serving. Morrison folded the papers. Mrs. Blackwood, I've known you for 20 years. You're a pillar of this community. But in this case, I believe you're wrong. Martha's face went slack. What? These children are clearly well cared for. The home is clean and safe. The parents, while unconventional in their courtship, are legally married and providing adequate care. He looked at Jim and Sarah. I see no reason to remove the children from this home. Sarah collapsed against Jim. He held her while she sobbed with relief. Tommy and Rose ran to them, and they held each other, a family intact against all odds. This isn't over, Martha hissed. I'll appeal. I'll find other judges. You'll do nothing. Morrison's voice went hard. Or I'll charge you with filing false reports and wasting the court's time. Do you understand me, Martha? She stared at him, fury and disbelief warring on her face. Finally, she jerked her horse around and rode off without another word. Morrison mounted his horse, looked down at Jim. You made enemies today. I made them weeks ago. Today I just kept my family. Watch yourself. Martha Blackwood doesn't forgive, and she has a long memory. So do I. Morrison almost smiled. Then he tipped his hat and rode away, the sheriff and witnesses following. Jim and Sarah and the children stood in the yard, holding each other, hardly daring to believe they'd won. Is it really over? Tommy whispered. For now, Jim said. But they'll come back. Maybe, probably, but we'll be ready. That night, they celebrated. Real celebration. Sarah made a feast from their supplies. They ate until they were stuffed. Tommy taught Rose a card game. Jim watched his family, this impossible, miraculous family, and felt something shift in his chest. Happiness. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. He'd thought he'd never feel it again. What are you smiling about? Sarah asked. You, them, this. We almost lost it. But we didn't. Because you fought. Because we fought. Together. He pulled her close. That's the difference. This time I wasn't alone. They put the children to bed. Tucked them in, told them stories, promised them safety they'd fought tooth and nail to guarantee. When the children were asleep, Jim and Sarah stood in the doorway watching them breathe. I was so scared, Sarah whispered. When Morrison said he wanted to interview them separately, I thought, I know. If we'd lost them, I wouldn't have survived it. Yes, you would have. You're the strongest person I know. She turned to face him. I'm only strong because you make me feel safe. Before you, I was just surviving. Running. Barely holding on. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You gave me a reason to stop running. You gave us a home. Jim wiped her tears. You gave me a reason to start living again. For 7 years, I was just a ghost. Going through motions. Waiting to die. Then you showed up on my porch, and everything changed. Was it worth it? All the fighting, all the trouble? He looked past her at the sleeping children. At this house they'd defended together. At the life they'd built from nothing but desperation and hope. Every single second, he said. They made love that night. Really made love, not just sharing a bed, but sharing themselves. Slow and tender and real. Two broken people putting their pieces back together with gentle hands and whispered promises. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Sarah's head on Jim's chest, his fingers in her hair. What happens now? She asked. We keep living. We raise the children. We work the ranch. We grow old together if we're lucky. What about Martha? What about the town? Let them talk. Let them judge. We know the truth. And if they come after us again, then we fight again. And we'll keep fighting as long as we have to. He kissed her head. But I don't think they will. Morrison shut her down hard today. That'll make others think twice. I hope you're right. Even if I'm not, we'll be okay. Because we have something they don't. What's that? Love, real love. The kind that survives fires and fights and judgmental old women. The kind that builds homes and raises children and makes life worth living. Sarah lifted her head, looked at him with those eyes that saw everything. I love you, James Caldwell. I love you, Sarah Caldwell. They sealed it with a kiss. Then they slept wrapped around each other, safe and home, and finally at peace. Spring came early that year. The snow melted. Wildflowers pushed through mud. Jim taught Tommy to rope and ride. Sarah planted a garden with Rose, teaching her about seeds and patience and growth. The town slowly thawed toward them. Not everyone. Martha Blackwood would hate them until her dying day. But others started nodding in the street, offering small kindnesses, acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, this strange family wasn't the threat they'd thought. Reverend Horn visited one Sunday, asked if he could hold services at the ranch for those who wanted to come. Said some folks were uncomfortable with Martha's influence over the church in town, wanted an alternative. Jim looked at Sarah. She shrugged. Why not? So Sunday services started happening in their yard. 5 people the first week, 15 the second. By the 4th week, they had 30 people singing hymns and sharing coffee and treating Jim and Sarah like they belonged. We built something, Sarah said one evening, watching the sunset from the porch. What's that? A community. A real one. Based on acceptance instead of judgment. Jim pulled her close. We built more than that. We built a life. A good one. Think it'll last? I think we'll fight to make it last. That's all anyone can do. Tommy and Rose ran by, chasing each other, laughing. Jim watched them, these children who'd started as strangers and become his whole world. Tommy was taller now. Rose's face had filled out. They were thriving. Papa, Rose called. Watch this. She did a cartwheel, fell halfway through, laughed and tried again. I see you, little one. That's good. Keep practicing. Tommy joined his father on the porch. Papa, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever miss your first family? Emma and Margaret. Jim's chest tightened, but the pain was different now. Not sharp and cutting, just tender, like an old wound that had healed but still ached in the rain. Every day, he said honestly. But not the way I used to. Before, missing them felt like dying. Now it feels like remembering, like holding on to good things that happened while making room for new good things. So you can love us and still love them. Yes, son. Love doesn't work like that. It doesn't replace. It expands. Tommy considered this. Good. Because I love you and I loved Papa Daniel, even though he hurt us. Is that wrong? Jim pulled his boy close. No, that's human. We don't get to choose who we love or when we stop. We just love and hope we survive it. That sounds hard. It is, but it's also the best thing we do. Sarah joined them, Rose in her arms. They stood together on the porch they'd defended, looking out at the land they'd claimed, the community they'd built, the life they'd fought for. You know what I realized? Sarah said. What's that? We're not broken anymore. We're healing. Jim looked at his wife, his children, his home, saw the cracks still there, the scars that would never fully fade, but also saw the growth, the new strength, the love that had filled the empty spaces. Yeah, he said, we are. That night, Jim carved new names into the doorframe of the children's room. Below Thomas and Rose, he added James and Sarah Caldwell family, 1878 forever. He stood back, admiring his work. Sarah appeared beside him. Forever's a long time, she said. Good thing we're stubborn. She laughed, kissed him. They stood in the doorway while their children slept, while the fire crackled, while the world outside remained cold and judgmental and difficult. But inside, they had everything. They had survived. The winter survived, the town survived their own broken pasts and uncertain futures. They had built something real from nothing but desperation and courage, and the foolish belief that love could conquer everything. And maybe it couldn't. Maybe the world would throw more challenges at them. Maybe Martha Blackwood would never forgive. Maybe the children would grow up with scars. Maybe Jim and Sarah would have hard days ahead, but they would face it together. As a family, as partners, as two people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided to build something worth protecting in the light. Jim closed the door to the children's room, took Sarah's hand, led her to their own bed, where they'd hold each other through another night, another day, another year of building this impossible life. Because that's what love was. Not perfection, not ease, not the absence of struggle. Love was showing up, fighting back, refusing to surrender, choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard, building something worth keeping from the wreckage of what came before. And they had done exactly that. They had found each other frozen on a porch, desperate and dying and alone. And together, they had built a home. Not just a house, a home. Full of laughter and arguments and cooking smells and children's voices and love so fierce it could weather any storm. Jim held Sarah that night and every night after knowing that this right here, right now, this messy, complicated, beautiful family was everything he'd thought he'd lost and more than he deserved and absolutely worth fighting for. They had survived. They had built. They had loved, and that was victory enough for any lifetime.